This is a presentation by Dr. Mark Brown on academic language. This presentation was given November 8th, 2013. This PowerPoint slide just gives you examples of words that are part of academic language, such as syntax, community, assistive technology, expanded core curriculum. At the beginning of this presentation, I wanted to get information from the students in terms of how they defined academic language. So I had them do a share and pair exercise. They first had to define academic language for a pre-service education major at Daemen College. They then had to reflect on how might academic language differ from informal language or slang. Finally, they had to state a concrete classroom or workplace example where they would use academic language. Recognizing social versus academic language. This chart has two columns. The first column are examples of what informal language might look like. The second column has examples of what academic language might look like. For informal language, that often is demonstrated through their use of a repetition of words. Sentences may start with you know and but. Individuals may use or overuse the terms guys, cool, and awesome. Conversely, academic language pertains to the use of a variety of words and more sophisticated vocabulary. Sentences start with transition words such as however, moreover, and in addition. Finally, in academic language, there was no use of any slang whatsoever. There is a YouTube video that you can access through this link, and the title of the video is A Teacher's Perspective of Academic Language. There is a quote that she uses. She says, "Using academic language is a very powerful experience for students." Academic language should occur during all three stages: planning, instruction, and assessment. This cycle of effective teaching in relation to facilitating student learning is related directly to EdTPA. If you look at the picture to the right of your PowerPoint slide, you see that student learning is connected to the three stages: planning, assessment, and instruction. Academic language. Another way of viewing academic language is that this is the language that is used in the classroom and in the workplace. This is the language that can be found in text. This is the language pertaining to assessments. And ultimately, this is the language for academic success. What is the academic language process? There are three stages that a student must go through to begin to understand this process. The first stage is metacognitive, which is thinking about thinking. The second stage is discourse, and the final stage is application. In the metacognitive stage, the student begins to understand by reading, listening, and thinking. In the second stage, the student communicates through discourse. He or she listens, speaks, writes, and connects information that he's learned to his or her prior knowledge or prior experience. The third stage is perform. That pertains to application. The student thinks, reads, writes, listens, speaks, problem solves, and then creates a solution to the problem that is being addressed. This is another video that addresses the dimensions and teachings of academic language. The three dimensions are vocabulary, syntax, and discourse. Vocabulary pertains to words, phrases, and intonation. Syntax pertains to how words are organized in a sentence to convey meaning. Discourse pertains to the overall structure in a message. Academic language can also be highly complex. Therefore, it can often require both teachers and students to understand the specific academic language demands in terms of the content being taught in the classroom curriculum. Academic language for math and science may pose the following language demands: the use of symbolic notation, visual displays such as graphs, At what age should academic language begin? Beginning with preschool or pre-kindergarten through third grade, students need to learn age-appropriate vocabulary and language that will give them strong foundation for academic language in the future. With academic language being taught to students with disabilities, this is an example of how the teacher may have to assist that student to be successful learning academic language. For example, a student with a mild disability may need to be taught decoding skills using Orton Gillingham and strategies to develop her or his vocabulary and later comprehension. Teacher instruction for students, pre-kindergarten to third grade inclusion. An example pertains to show and tell. When organizing a show and tell session, the teacher should instruct young children to use the phrase, "I'm going to share an experience that I had." From this phrase, children learn two new words: share rather than tell or talk about. This exercise allows a child to build her or his vocabulary as well as their being able to understand word associations. So they understand that share is associated with the words tell or talk about. For students in 4th grade through 8th grade, instruction should transition in order to teach students more sophisticated academic language skills, including vocabulary and grammatical structure. A student with a mild disability may need assistance through a word bank, Frere's model, multisensory phonics instruction, and a graphic organizer. Students can organize their thoughts through a semantic web or a concept map. Teacher instruction for students from 4th grade to 8th grade inclusion. An example, teach students that academic language can include many areas of language such as phonology and spelling. This example pertains to pronunciation stress shifts. For example, when someone talks, they make shifts in how they pronounce certain syllables in a word. The first example is anthropology. versus anthropological. The second example is morphology versus morphological. The third example is manipulate versus manipulation. Although these words are clearly related and look very similar, they have spelling and pronunciation that may be confusing to students with disabilities, language delays, articulation problems, or to students where English is not their first language. For students in the 9th grade through 12th grade inclusion, they need to know a large vocabulary of academic words used across disciplines, and they need to have access to and use more complicated grammatical structures. A student with a mild disability may need to be taught how to create thematic units and comprehend more complex word structures, for example, homonym, alliteration, idiom, etc. The teacher should support critical thinking through Venn diagrams and Bloom's taxonomy. Teacher instruction for students grades 9th grade to 12th grade inclusion. When teaching reading comprehension, teachers should identify language that students will have difficulty understanding and will determine the student's ability to comprehend informational text in a short story or passage. This language may include an academic vocabulary word such as stimulate, a preposition such as between, an adverb such as hardly, a grammatical structure such as either or. Why is academic language so important for elementary, middle, and junior high school students? Students who learn academic language are more likely to be successful in their schooling and later professional setting. Students who do not learn academic language may struggle academically, be retained, and possibly later drop out of school. I had students do an activity where they were to take notes pertaining to the academic language terms in their major. They were given an Ed TPA vocabulary that pertained to academic language, in terms of vocabulary dimension, and they had to compare their academic language to the academic language used in another educational program. So I told them to just compare one term on their sheet, such as culture or artifact, with another educational program, for a student having an educational program, a different educational program, and how might it differ. For example, the term culture and its corresponding definition would differ at the vocabulary dimension for an early childhood special education major. For example, social economic status, family traditions, extended family responsibilities, versus a foreign language adolescence major, dress, dialect, cuisine, etc. For example, the term artifact and its corresponding definition would differ at the vocabulary dimension. For a social studies adolescence major, example would be a research paper and a video clip of a historic event, versus a childhood education major. An example would be a written essay and a corresponding rubric. Academic language should also be organized in the following three categories. The first category is language function. The second category is language demand. The third category is vocabulary. How is language function defined? Language function means the verbs used in the learning target, such as identify, analyze, summarize, define, explain, conclude, justify, compare, and sort. Here are language function examples used in specific content areas. There are 3 columns. Each column pertains to a content area. The first column pertains to the content area English. The second column pertains to the content area Math. The third column pertains to the content area Social Studies. For English, language function examples include describe, explain, justify, evaluate. For the content area Math, language function examples include compare and contrast, explain, describe, prove. For the content area Social Studies, language function examples include describe, evaluate, identify, and locate. You need to please get the handout that is available in the Education Department in 144 Duns Scotus as pertains to language function. You can ask Dr. Susan Krikovich, the department chair in the Education Department, for a copy of the worksheet. You can also print out a copy at the link colorincolorado.org with permission of Sarah Klein. How is language demand defined? Language demand refers to the assignment or product that the student makes, such as an essay, paragraph, sentence, speech, lab report, reflection, play, poem, comic strip, magazine, article, and poster. This PowerPoint slide looks at the relationship between language function and language demand. For example, the function of the word define, the demand for the word is to write definitions to vocabulary words. The next word is assess. The demand is to write a 1-paragraph self-reflection. For compare, the demand is to draw a Venn diagram and fill sections with terms. Debate, the demand is to participate in a class debate. Construct, the demand is to draw a comic strip with characters explaining the concept. Apply, the demand is to solve word problems involving 1 variable. Describe, the demand is to speak aloud for 30 seconds describing the characteristics of a sculpture. The demand pertains to what is demanded for the student to demonstrate in the classroom in relation to a specific lesson. How is vocabulary defined? Vocabulary, which includes any words that the student should be able to define in order to comprehend the content of the lesson. These words may be specific to the discipline. For example, the word artifact that's used in the content area pertaining to social studies. In conclusion, pre-service teachers in the Education Department are asked to do the following in their lesson plan. They must select 1 key language function essential for students to learn within the central focus of their lesson plan. They must identify a key learning task from a lesson that provides students opportunities to practice using the language function. Language demands, that is, you need to consider the language function and task. You need to describe the language demands, whether they're written or oral, that students need to understand and or use. You need to look at the vocabulary, the syntax, and the discourse as pertains to the language demand. Language supports. Describe instructional supports that will help students understand and effectively use language function and additional language demands. Finally, assessment. What formal and informal assessments will provide evidence of a student's understanding and fluency? These are books that I shared with the students for this presentation. This first book is entitled Academic Conversations, Classroom Talk that Fosters Critical Thinking and Content Understanding. Students were given a copy of Chapter 3, Lesson Activities for Developing Conversational Skills. The skills are then outlined on the PowerPoint slide. The second paperback book that is on reserve at the Research Information Commons Center. The title of this paperback is Academic Language Literacy Strategies for Adolescents, a how-to manual for educators. This paperback shares with the readers the author's experience in assisting teachers and school to improve student academic achievement through the use of academic language instructional strategies in the content area math, writing, and science. The following slides are website links. This first slide pertains to website links that relate to academic language. So please go to these website links if you want additional information on this topic. These next slides discuss curriculum modifications and website links where you can have access to types of curriculum modifications for specific content area instruction. For reading, there are 3 links that pertain to Orton-Gillingham, the Wilson approach to reading, and Bloom's taxonomy. For writing, there is a link to the 6 traits of writing. For ELA, English Language Arts, there are 2 links to the Frayer model and graphic organizers. For math, there are links to Touch Math and the Frayer model. For ELA Writing, Math, Social Studies, and Science, there's a link to graphic organizers. And finally, for foreign language, there's a link to keyword mnemonics. Thank you.